In case you're still skeptical of the pre-Columbian Atlantic crossings, how about the story of the Venetian Zeno brothers, Niccolo and Antonio? In a very old story, considered by the usual historian establishment as being a hoax, yet was itself well known and even mentioned by Mr. Canada himself, Jacques Cartier, during the Crusades of the 14th century, the Zeno family operated an extensive cargo logistics business out of the Republic of Venice. They were wealthy shipping magnates that transported goods all the way from England to the Holy Land. Apparently, during one such routine voyage, a century before Columbus, the brothers made the acquaintance of the Earl of Orkney, Henry Sinclair, in Scotland. Lord Sinclair, referred to in historical documents as the Admiral of Scotland's naval forces during the 1390s, was keen to acquire certain Icelandic settlements, and we know he had a number of ongoing territorial disputes with the Norse kingdoms. Some additionally have claimed that the Scotsman, apparently a Knights Templar master and progenitor of the early Freemasons in Scotland, was among the last of his disbanded religious military order left in Europe. Legend has it that those Templars who hadn't been killed by the treachery of French King Philip IV had escaped from La Rochelle with their fleet, loaded with treasure, and sought refuge in Robert the Bruce's Scotland, helping him to kick English butt in the Battle of Bannockburn, before heading west to you-know-where. Anyway, the Zeno brothers apparently accompanied the Earl on his Atlantic raiding expeditions, and they successfully conquered not only a number of settlements in Iceland, but also the Faroe and Shetland Islands, before having a go at Greenland as well. It was during their sojourn there that they encountered a number of local fishermen, having recently returned in rags 25 years after having been blown off course, shipwrecked, and being held captive by a tribe of savage cannibals. Much has happened to other Viking fishermen all the way back to Leif Erikson's time. It's probably not unreasonable to assume that this kind of sailing misadventure was a regular occurrence in the treacherous waters of the North Atlantic. And it would be ludicrous to assume that Mr. Erikson and co. were the only generation ever to go back and forth. Intrigued, Sinclair determined to go see for himself, and the experienced Venetians were given command of his ships. Sure enough, they eventually came across desolate new lands in the west, replete with said hostile natives, who had managed to learn the language of the fishermen they hadn't yet eaten. But it was those very culinary proclivities that discouraged our crew from taking the risk of joining them for supper, so they pushed on further south, following the coastline and encountering more favourable climes, and a region described by the brothers as being fertile and green, in which there was some discussion of setting up a settlement. The crew were by now getting mutinously anxious to return home, and the adventure was cut short, its details recorded in letters and maps that the Zeno family reproduced in later decades. Whether it was true, or just a later Venetian attempt at pooh-poohing Genoese claims to the New World, is hard to say. But what it suggests, yet again, is that while aristocrats and chest-beaters were busy puffing and preening, fishermen have always known a lot more than we give them credit for. That is to say, when they weren't exaggerating the size of their catch.